This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rapin. I'm back after 2 weeks. This is episode 377. We are live on Twitch. I am so pumped to be here. I'm joined by two Spider People anomalies and your friendly neighborhood Spider comic book creator, Danny.
Hello.
And Kara.
Sorry. You made a reference. You referenced the thing that I saw today. I'm so excited.
And the voice of the face that you cannot see right now, the one and only comic book creator, friend of the show, Kevvo.
Hello. I'm here.
Kevvo, we're so happy to have you back on the show. I'm super excited to talk about comic books with all of you. I've been restrained in another universe for 2 years, and Paul had to step in for me. I'm finally back, and boy, I'm about to explode. I have a quick announcement or a series of announcements to go through before we actually start to talk about comic books. So, July is coming. We're taking a month off, as we usually do every single year. We've got some killer minisodes planned. We've got a book versus book that Kara and Kate just recorded, an Ice Cream Man Volume 8 that Nick and I recorded earlier today, an interview with a comic guest, and I'm not going to tell you who, but it's really cool. And we have a planned release of Patreon content, because as I came back from my multiversal travels, I was looking at the Patreon and I said, there's too much. There's so many episodes of stuff on our Patreon. I have to do a planned release of pressure. So we're dropping the IRCB Movie Club #2 into the public feed at the end of July. It's where Paul, Brian, and I talked about Scott Pilgrim versus the World. It's one of my favorite movies, comic book movies at least. And I'm super excited for you all to hear it. So I'm going to be we're going to be taking the summer off. We're going to do a hangout in the middle of January of July. I'm calling it beach style. This is where I'm going to wear sunscreen. I'm going to sit indoors at my chair on my computer, pretend that I'm on the beach, and just have like rolling waves in the background, very much like the fan that I left on when we started recording. You're going to hear that in the background as well. So I'm super excited about that. Make sure to stay subscribed. If you're unsubscribed, don't unsubscribe. But anyways, let's get into things. I have two legally mandated questions that I have to ask, and I'm going crazy over here. It's how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Danny.
Mike, I've been very well. I'll talk about all that stuff in just a second. I did want to address something. Unfortunately, John Romita Sr. passed away. He's a legendary comic creator. If you read a Spider-Man comic, you've probably seen some of his work, like some of the older ones. And just over the past week, seeing not only creators, but fans talk about him. I watched a few interviews that he did a few years ago, and listening to him talk about taking over Steve Ditko and what a monumental task that was for him, and how he was really in competition against himself, really, to make sure that he held up the quality of Spider-Man. It was really, really cool. So a very sad passing to a great creator, but I did want to talk about it because unfortunately he passed, I think, last week on Tuesday, maybe. So we had already recorded our show by then. So I wanted to talk about that. So yeah, go read an old Spider-Man book because they're really, really good.
They're wild. They're bonkers, but they're really good.
Yeah. As far as myself, so Mike, I also feel like I haven't been around forever, which is weird, but I think it's because a couple of weeks ago I was at a DreamHack convention, which is like a gaming convention here in Dallas. That was a lot of fun. And then last week I was off at Fan Expo Dallas. That's our biggest convention we have. And I feel like it just kind of recharged my comic book batteries.
Heck yeah.
Going to a big show like that, like talking to creators, meeting other fans, seeing like friends that convention friends, people that you only see around the conventions. Like all that stuff kind of just recharged my batteries, and I'm so excited about it. I think I need to do this at least once a year to like get super pumped up about comics again.
Wait, go to a big convention or go to a video game convention that's not about comic books?
Both.
Maybe both. Yeah, maybe both. It was a lot of walking, so that was also really good health-wise.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think going to a big convention, like I missed it so much. I mean, I don't get to go to a lot out of state, but we do have a few cool shows here locally. Yeah. So that was really nice. Meet creators from all over the world.
Nice.
So that was very cool. And now I'm really pumped to talk about comic books. And for some reason this week, I really leaned into my Captain America. Okay. I don't know why.
Wearing the shirt.
So,
yeah, I know.
I am.
You ready to talk about this?
Super patriotic.
Yeah. This was not planned. I figured I was like, I'm gonna keep the shirt on now that I realized it. The first book I'm gonna talk about is Captain America: Cold War. This is a crossover between the Captain America: Symbol of Truth and Sentinel of Liberty books. So both Captain Americas are coming together. Because the crossover finally finished, I was waiting for that to happen so I could get caught up.
Mm-hmm.
This one's written by Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly and Tochi Onebuchi, with art by Carlo Magno, R.B. Silva, and Alina Erofiba, with letters by Joe Caramagna. So in what I love about this book is the nonsense premise of it. Uh, in this one, Bucky Barnes makes his deadliest move yet. The newest player in the nefarious game spanning all of civilization has teamed up with Sam Wilson's nemesis, the White Wolf. None of that makes sense to
What is
anyone
okay?
that's not reading these books.
Sure.
Isn't the
So
White Wolf Bucky? Isn't
that
Bucky with
the
a White Wolf?
movies would have you believe so, but it is
The
in the
movies
comics.
would have me believe so.
In the comics, it's a whole different character that's like an adopted brother to T'Challa. Who literally turns into a white wolf. This was a really cool reveal. Sorry if I spoil that for anyone.
No,
But
I want to make clear for those of you just enjoying the audio experience here that when Danny started explaining the White Wolf, Mike literally started pulling his hair out. So,
Yeah, I mean,
comics, everyone.
this is what you get to coming to the live show, okay?
The other incredible part of this is that also Steve's adopted son is in this book. I didn't even know Captain America had a kid.
What?
What?
Danny,
Exactly.
why are comics?
Ian Rogers, aka the Nomad.
Okay.
Of
Ian
course.
Rogers?
Yeah, Ian.
Yeah, Steve named them after his grandfather.
Okay.
Okay. Fine. Sure.
So this book is a whole lot of nonsense. Dimension Z is like this other dimension that Zola invented. It's very weird stuff. None of that matters. What I really enjoyed about this book is just how they can. So you have two different groups of creators that are coming together. Normally, these crossovers they'll feel very clunky because you're actually just taking like two different kind of scripts and wherever the ideas were going and trying to smash them together. Hopefully, they fit. But I think the Captain America office at Marvel, like the whole team, I think they're working very well together. They really have both Steve and Sam running on like very nice parallel tracks that the stories very easily cross over. Also, the art is amazing for most of the issues. There was one issue that I was not like. The Alpha and Omega issues are done by a different artist that's not the usual artist from the books. It didn't click with me as much. I think a lot of the character designs are very different too. But other than that, this book was a lot of fun, and it's just a whole bunch of nonsense.
Crossovers usually are just buy both books.
Yeah, exactly.
What plot?
Yeah. So this is nothing of like there's no Hydra in this. There's like none of the usual Captain America stuff, which was what I found really intriguing. And which is what led me to read the next thing I read, which is Captain America Volume 1 and 2, Castaway and Dimension Z. This is from the Rick Remender run from 2012. This is the part that explains how Steve got a kid, what Dimension Z is. So my buddy Jeff told me, you want to go read that if you just read this, because otherwise nothing makes sense. Now, I guess I read them in the wrong order, but...
I was going to say, aren't you supposed to read the backstory before the story?
Shouldn't you have read all of Captain America leading up to this in order to understand what happens in the latest volume, Danny? Come on.
You know, I will say I was pretty surprised I didn't read this when it came out, because that's the era when I started reading comics.
Okay.
And then Remender was like my jam too. Like his stuff was either really violent or really edgy, and that was all me. Like, you know, fresh out of college, like let's fuck up the world. So that really should have vibed with me, and I just kind of missed this.
Adults now, so everybody can die.
I just realized I've never read a Captain America comic.
Oh,
I am
all right.
pretty sure I have never read a Captain America comic. Just thinking about that, I was like, no, it's the guy from the movie. It's Chris Evans. That's fine. I don't need anything additional. But like, okay, so maybe this is what tell me a Captain America book to read, because I am pretty sure the only time I've seen Captain America in a comic book is that one panel from Civil War where his pecs are like enormous and like rolling out from his chest like a bag of potatoes or something. And it's just, that's what people make fun of when they make fun of male physique in comic books. Like, it's just that one panel where it's just like,
yeah. Well, we got 6 folks watching live on Twitch, so I'm wondering if you're all comic book fans, give us some recommendations for Kara that I'll pass
Tell me a
along.
Captain America book.
Yeah, give us a Captain America book that Kara should definitely read.
Preferably
Danny,
one with lots of like tension with him and Bucky.
Yes.
Are there those, or do I have to read fan fiction for that?
I will say, don't start here. This is a bad starting point.
Yeah, I'm gonna start with getting mad about the White Wolf. Like,
okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So just real quick to touch on some of the creative team, because it wasn't just Rick Remender. As amazing as he is, this has art by John Romita Jr. with an army of inkers: Klaus Johnson, Scott Hannem, Tom Palmer. Colors by Dean White. Letters by Joe Caramagna. Another thing I realized is that depending on who's inking John Romita Jr., his art vibes with me or it doesn't. So there are some inkers like Klaus Johnson. I know I'm gonna love the issue, and I think Klaus Johnson's inks just make a lot of people better artists, or the art
Frank
look
Miller?
better.
Frank Miller.
Careful, we are on a public forum, Michael.
Come at me in the chat. I see nothing.
Hold
I
up.
see nothing.
Wait, Danny. My parents are tuning in for this one. What's an inker? How does inking make a difference to art?
Hold on. We should ask our comic book extraordinaire who's on the show that question a little bit later in the show. How about that?
Okay. All right.
We'll save that one. We'll put that one in our
Kevvo,
back pocket.
I hope you don't mind explaining your entire process in maybe under 20 minutes. Is that okay?
Sure, no problem. That's how I do it anyway.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Super fast.
But Danny, did you like this? You enjoyed it?
I did. I had a really good time because I read 10 issues of Captain America in a row. Like, this is 2012 stuff. Like I said, it was really fun. It's nonsense, complete nonsense. Dimension Z is the worst. And then also, like, not all of the anchors that were playing along were my jam. So, like, some of the issues I was not super on board with the art. But I think because John Romita is drawing a lot of, like, big buff bodies and, like, monsters and Dimension Z nonsense, that stuff fits. I don't really like the way he draws small children. Because the heads look a little
big buff bodies and tiny children accurately.
Yeah, no.
What about tiny buff children?
I don't know. The story never called for one of those, so maybe. But I think if you have to draw one of the two, and you can draw the big strong dudes,
like one of those
I think that works.
paintings where you're of like the Madonna and the Child, where you're just like, did this artist ever interact with a baby? Survey says no.
Yeah,
this is like nightmare fuel for me. Like, I already know how bad John Romita Jr. draws some things, and I can't imagine big buff children in any of his comics because I feel like it would just haunt me for years. So please, Frank Miller, don't ever ask him to do that. I know that's something you want him to do. Don't ask him to do that, please.
You get a little Steve Rogers in this one, and a little Ian Rogers. But it's cool. I really also like that they explore Steve as an artist in this one. Like, he actually, because he's stuck in this dimension for like a decade, he has to do something to pass the time. And one of the things that he's trying to teach his new son that he adopted was like that there's other cool things in the world and not just violence like they've been experiencing in this world. So he draws like this really cool mural. That was a really neat moment. And I was like, man, Remender, you really have some like interesting ideas that sometimes are kind of left unexplored in lieu of all the extreme action bullshit that I also love.
Are you telling me that we could have been having like the Captain America Spider-Man illustration power hour at Marvel? Like, just a book of them drawing and like tagging their way through Brooklyn and Queens. Let's go.
I think if Steve hadn't become Captain America, he would have become Bob Ross.
Oh,
okay.
Oh, that's beautiful, Danny. I love that. New headcanon.
That's nice.
So, But yeah, that's it. That's a lot of that's your Captain America report for the week.
Thank you, Danny. Appreciate that. Well, Kevvo, let's jump over to you. I realize that I totally skipped you at the beginning of this. I'm way out of my mind today, so apologies for that. But how are you? How have comic books been? Welcome back to the show. For maybe folks at home who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And because, if I'm not mistaken, you're somewhere in the Michigan area, could you give us a bit of a maybe not so West Michigan weather update?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for letting me come back. It's been a couple of years. I thought you lost my phone number, but it's nice to be invited back again. West Michigan Weather Watch. It is warming up, unfortunately. The weather has been great for the last week. It's been nice and cool, but the temperatures are going up, and I guess that's what you get in the summer. So the plus side, though, is that it's June and it's Pride Month, and it's been a lot of fun so far this month. Last year, I published my first book, and so this year I got to go to Pride festivals as a vendor for the first time, and it's been a kick. Yes, it's been so much fun. I went to Pride Festival the first weekend this month, and I've got another one coming up this Saturday. But it's so much fun to see people. I wasn't sure if graphic novels would fit at Pride, and I'm not sure why I was hesitant, because I feel like there is a large overlap between queer people and comic book lovers. And I found a lot of people at Pride who really were excited to talk about comics with me. So y'all need to set up a booth next year.
Yes. We're going to try. Who knows?
Okay.
Now that cons are becoming more of a thing, we definitely should.
My brain just made the connection that I'm sure thousands of people have made before, where you're saying, oh, queer people like comics, who knew? And I'm like, well, actually, let me shove my glasses up my nose. The superhero comic archetype in the United States is all about finding your true self and true identity in a world where you have to wear a mask. So, there's overlap, I would say.
I think you hit it right on the nose. Absolutely. Absolutely. So because of all things Pride, and because I'm currently working on a book right now, I feel like I'm a little bit behind in reading. And as I mentioned before the show, I usually get my recommendations from IRCB. The book that I read actually most recently is Ducks, 2 Years in the Oil Sands by Kate Beaton. This book has been discussed before. So it's the story of a woman who has to pay off student loans. So she goes to work in the oil sands of rural Canada. And this is just the story of what she experienced. This book was recommended to me by a friend who doesn't read comics or graphic novels. Hi, Katie. And it was not at all what I expected. In the story, Kate tells stories in a way that seem real and present and very matter of fact. And I love the approach. There's very little judgment written into the story. That's really reserved for the reader. So for those who have read this, you'll know what I'm talking about. I found myself rolling my eyes a lot and gritting my teeth a lot at the things that she had to endure, the comments she had to endure, and things like this. It was a really hefty book. I thought I would finish it in less time than I did. But there's just so much to look at. She does really beautiful drawings, especially of the scenes of the towns in rural Canada that were just amazing. I love this book. Just a content warning, there is sexual violence and depression in it. But I do recommend it.
Yeah, that book is deceptively dense. I feel like it is a big book, but if you know any of Kate's work, you know that she does a lot with the page. And this book in particular, it was so much unfolding, and every single chapter of the book, I had to read it in 2 or 3 sittings over a couple of days, just to digest it all. It's definitely one of the best books I read this year, but it's also a very heavy book.
Yes, absolutely.
Given the subject matter. So yeah, but I'm glad you enjoyed it though.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, me too.
Well, I guess let's, Kara, what about you? How have you been? How have comic books been?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for asking. I, right before this, saw the new Spider-Man movie. I don't even remember the title. What's that one? Is it Across the Spider-Verse?
I don't
Across
know.
the Spider-Verse? It's Across.
Thank you, Danny. I was like, the new Spider-Man. Everyone knows what the new Spider-Man is. 2 years from now, when somebody's listening to this, they'll know exactly what Spider-Man I'm talking about.
Yes.
All right. I rewatched Into the Spider-Verse last night in anticipation of seeing this movie. I was still unprepared. It's so good. It's so good. I went, I went to see it with a friend and it ended and we just kind of just sat there. We were in the second row of the movie theater, by the way, in like seats that reclined a little bit. So I was like in the movie, y'all. I was in the
Wow.
Spider-Verse, and it just so many spiders. And I love it. I love these films because they really do feel like the full potential of a comic book film is being realized, because they go so all out with the varying animation styles to match the different like universes that they're in. And I definitely have some friends who are like casual Marvel watchers, but have started to be turned off by all the like multiverse stuff in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I want to be like, cool, same, but counterpoint, Spider-Verse. You should just watch the Spider-Verse movies because
like,
they
no,
do it right.
Wait, hold on. I know you're sick of the multiverse. I know. So hold on. You got to hear me out with Spider-Verse. You got to hear me out with this
Counterpoint, there's a T-Rex Spider-Man. Who wouldn't want to see that? That's comic books at its finest.
Someone went frame by frame in the trailer and found a popsicle Spider-Man that's chasing Miles at one point. So, like, anything's possible, okay? Anything's possible in this movie.
It's great. It's wonderful. So that's my big, like, it's good, y'all. Please go see the Spider-Man movie.
Yes.
And I just, like, I was really proud of myself for knowing who Ben Reilly was, because I don't really read Spider-Man comics, but I knew who he was because I'm on the internet. The internet is merciless and never forgets. So.
We are also very proud of you for that, just so you know.
I also knew that Spider-Man 2099 was real, but like an actual like character from the comics, because that one I knew from it's been a hot minute since I've talked about this on the show, but in college I briefly had an under the table job at the local comic book shop, sorting through their like slush bins in the basement. Like
Paul is over here salivating. He wished that he had that job in college.
My job was to go through all these long boxes of just miscellaneous comic books and sort them into an order that made sense. So I spent like a whole semester just like popping into the shop basement and creating a system of organization for all these comic books. And that was honestly one of the best comic book educations I have ever received. And part of that was just getting really, really familiar with like 90s Spider-Man titles, because y'all, there are so many in the slush bins at comic book shops around the US, I'm sure. So.
We could and should have a full episode on how to organize comics, because everyone has their own way, but coming from somebody that worked at a comic shop, probably that should be a more efficient way. I don't know. But I think that'd be really interesting to talk about.
This sounds like a 9-person roundtable, like
that's like
studio style thing. Like the whole cast shows up, and just like I can already hear the range of like Tia just being like, throw it in the trash, it doesn't matter, to Nick's like, if it came out, that's the order that it came out to. Paul's like, I don't care, bag and board it, stack a million on top. I love it already. Right.
So let me call the Hollywood Reporter so they can get us one of those big tables.
Yeah, big.
So I did read an actual comic book, and in a wonderful bit of, when you are just lazy and you procrastinate, but you procrastinate long enough where your laziness becomes a profound pre-planning for a different thing. That's me on the show today, because a few times back that I was on the show, I was telling you all about my latest Carl Barks Duck comic acquisition from Fantagraphics, the Golden Nugget Boat. And everyone said, what on earth is a nugget boat? And I am delighted to wrap up that storyline here, because I didn't read it until this week, and I can now tell you what a nugget boat is.
Nice.
All right, so again, Carl Barks, one of the most famous and well-regarded comic illustrators of the 20th century, is the reason that you have DuckTales, because he fleshed out the whole like Duckburg world in Disney Comics with Scrooge McDuck and Launchpad McQuack and all those other characters. And in this volume from Fantagraphics that I was reading, it's the Scrooge McDuck, the Golden Nugget boat. And you're obviously wondering what a Golden Nugget boat is.
Please tell me.
There's a lot of backstory with Scrooge McDuck where he has created his wealth by prospecting in the Yukon at the turn of the last century. And they did some great jokes about his long lifespan in the most recent DuckTales reboot because they kept that canon. And you're like, wait a minute. that was over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
He's still the same age. Okay. So
it's all explained by his magnetic mutation, so don't worry about it.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
So, he goes back to the Yukon. He drags Donald and Huey, Dewey, and Louie, the little duckling nephews, to the Yukon so that he can prove that he's not an old fogey, that he can still prospect with the best of them. And he ends up in a golden nugget seeking contest. He pays his way there by like breaking chunks off of this like little golden boat that's made out of a golden nugget. And I'm just like, man, that's a different time when you could just like travel around saying, here, take the mast off my golden boat as payment for this meal in this diner. What a life. What a wholesome way of living.
Sure.
Take my doubloons. Don't worry about it. So they get up to the Yukon. He enters a contest to prove that he's like still got it. He's going to find the biggest golden nugget. And, plot happens. He gets foiled. He actually gets foiled by cousin Gladstone Gander, who you'll recognize from DuckTales as just being one lucky duck. Just sails through life, swans through life, to make a pun, to just anything that Gladstone needs he comes across. So he is also in this contest, and Scrooge is getting foiled until miraculously he finds the biggest nugget of them all. But how will he get it back to camp in time? Time to turn the nugget into a boat. A golden nugget boat.
Okay.
What?
Okay, Kara. Okay.
It makes it look like a Nile cruiser with like a masthead and everything. And I'm like, we just established that this contest was ending like within a day. Are you telling me that you and Donald and 3 children made a boat out of this golden nugget and then sailed it down the river? Do we have a physicist on the line? Does a boat float if it's made of gold, even if like the center of it is airtight?
How heavy is gold? I'm curious now.
I think it's too dense to float in water, if I'm not mistaken. That's why it sinks when they sift it. Anyways, I'm no gold expert.
But if it's a boat, would it float? So I'm delighted to return the conclusion of what is a golden nugget boat for Mike. Now we can get a resolution on that one.
I desperately needed it.
I feel better about all the Dimension Z nonsense I just talked about after listening to the Golden Nugget stuff.
I have to say, there's some really good creative storytelling in this volume, though. My favorite story is like this one where Scrooge McDuck's like scientists have created a shrink ray, and they the Beagle Boys, the antagonists who are always trying to steal Scrooge's gold, take the shrink ray and try to shrink down his money bin so they can just like pop it in their pocket and steal it. But while fighting Scrooge to get at the money bin, they all get hit by the shrink ray, and then they get carried off by a troop of ants. And
Honey, I Shrunk the Ducks. Got it.
Honey, I Shrunk the Ducks. And just the scenes with the ants are really well illustrated. Like they're brought into this chamber where like the queen ant and all of her like ant courtiers are sitting around a table, like holding their leaves, and they all like look as one towards the entrance when the new prey are brought in because they're about to get eaten or whatever, and the boys have to use the shrink ray to like go in and throw chunks of sugar at the ants to distract them and get everyone out again. It's wild. And I was just like, this is why I love adventure comics, because weird shit like this happens and it's delightful. Like, let's do something creative and fun.
See, now I'm so mad that I didn't get my hands on any of those Ducks comics from when the Fantagraphics did their big sale, because I tried to buy a couple and they were all sold out. So
yeah, they're all sold out all the time.
You probably got my copy. That's all I'm saying. I made the purchase and they had to go, oh, sorry, Mike, we ran out. So
they do reprint them all the time, though. They just do it in cycles. You'll have your moment.
I'll get there. Maybe I'll go take this from the library or something. We'll see. But
I also didn't expect, after a whole week of listening to people talk about the Denver Nuggets, that we
A
would
different
talk more
nugget.
about. Yeah, that we would talk more about nuggets on
More
the show.
nuggets. Yeah.
I had chicken nuggets for dinner to create to really just further the theme.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well let's hold on. We're done talking about nuggets. Instead, we're going to talk about a different type of food. I read a cute little comic called Vesper Onion. I guess before I get into that, I should say I've been gone for 2 weeks. I've been doing all sorts of stuff, guys. I saw Quantumania and then had to immediately follow it up with Into the Spider-Verse or Across the Spider-Verse.
Oh.
So, my life was a series of lows and then a very high. I don't watch Quantumania. That's all I'm going to say. Just don't watch it. It's not good.
There's also ants in that one, though.
There is ants in that one. Damn it.
It all comes around.
Yeah, but yeah, I is weird. Zelda has been out, so I've just like every free moment that I have, I'm playing Zelda. But I did force myself to only play Zelda in the mornings during my fun employment that I'm in right now. And then I read comics in the afternoon, so it's a good, avoidance of things. For anyone who's worried, don't worry. I have another job coming. It's just starting later. Yeah, but I did sit down and I read a Kickstarter book that I got called Vesper Onion. This is by Vera Green Tea with art by Sarah Webb. It is capital C, capital U, capital T, capital E, cute. 16 pages of just absolutely adorable witchy comic books. It's a story about a witch for hire who people send her letters and they say, hey, I need this little spell made or I need this little potion made. Can you get me the materials or can you go get the materials and then make it and I'll pay you for that? Pretty cute little concept. I want to shout out Paul G on the IRCB Discord who recommended this, posted it in there, and I was like, heck yeah, let's check it out. Totally worth every penny. I'm just so frustrated at how short it is because it's got a very cute little simple story. And then at the end, I was like, okay, now I need the 300-page graphic novel about this witch and her cat, Onion. So Vesper is the witch, Onion is the cat, and the cat has magical powers. You guys, it's everything that makes these types of books really, really fun. It's got its little darker elements. It's got its light elements. Everything's really soft and nice. And it's like Witch Hat Atelier in a lot of ways. Like there is this darkness that exists partially, but also the world is very fluffy and light and cute. And I can't recommend this enough. If you get a chance to buy it, it's $16, or excuse me, it was 16 pages. I think it was like $10 for it, but like, it's very handcrafted, very DIY. It is really, really good, super wholesome, and I can't wait for more. Like I hit hard subscribe on the newsletter for this company because I just need the next installment. So very, very excited about whatever comes next with that book. Yeah. So let's talk more about how much I hated Quantumania, though, because I just have to get this out. No,
I haven't seen it yet. That was the first Marvel film where I was just like, I don't need to see it. And then I'm hearing, oh, but you have to see it to know what is happening with the Marvelverse. And I was like, but do I? Like, can't I just skip right to the Marvels, which is the one I'm actually interested in?
Here's the thing. It's like, I feel like they're going to do the same thing that they did with Doctor Strange, where like, they're like, you have to have watched WandaVision to understand this movie. And then
you
they
genuinely
did a 15...
have.
No, you do, except for they
WandaVision.
do a 15-minute like, oh, by the way, here's what happened on WandaVision in the middle of the movie in case you didn't watch it. I feel like the Quantumania stuff is like, I don't know, not selling, especially with all the business with what's his name who played Kang. Like, who knows what they're going to do? So the next movie that's going to involve that character, that the stepping stone was supposed to be Quantumania, they're just going to wipe it. I was joking about shitting on this movie, but I definitely still want to keep doing it if you guys want to do this.
I mean, I just feel bad for Paul Rudd because wasn't he supposed to be like the next Iron Man? And they keep being like, oh, well, we don't have Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans anymore, but we have Paul Rudd, and all his movies are like, I mean, they exist.
Yeah, you can always go to Baskin Robbins and work there again. I also really find it funny that people are like, I know there's people that love the movies and they're like, no, you gotta watch this one, or you won't get it. I've been reading comics for over a decade. Trust me, I don't have to watch anything. I have jumped in the middle of weirder shit all along this track. So
Dimension Z, you just
exactly,
right and it worked. Anyways, we don't have to do that all night. Kevvo, I am curious if you read another book that you want to talk about, so we don't have to talk about Ant-Man for the rest of the night.
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. In honor of Pride Month, I also want to reference a book that I read. It's actually been a few weeks since I've read it, but it's a book that has just stuck with me. Genderqueer. I'm going to botch the name by Maya Kobab. I'm not sure.
I think it's
Um,
Kobabe.
Kobe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kobe. Okay, thank you. So that's another book that I heard about originally on this podcast. So I had to read it, and I read it, like I said, and I couldn't get it out of my head. It's personal and accessible, and tells a story that we don't hear often enough. Um, it's the story of the author's experience of figuring out how E and your body fit in the world, even as E figures out how E fits in your own body. And the author uses ER pronouns. At this point in time, with the way that things are in this country and whatnot, I feel like more than ever, we need to hear more stories of the trans and non-binary experience. And so that's what this is. I've been recommending this book to all of my friends who I think are open to learning and different perspectives.
Yeah, this is one of like the most powerful books I read in a long time when I first got my hands on it, and the fact that it is, I think we had Amy Wright
Wright
on the show very recently, who was part of the American Library Association around graphic novels and comics, and
Mm-hmm.
she was talking about how this is like one of the most challenged and banned books in America right now because
Yeah,
it explores this thing that apparently American culture is so very scared of, for no reason other than it's seemingly unknown, or it's something that people are scared of for whatever reason. But
right.
it is a very enlightening book. It's a book that, like, for me was like eye-opening to understand someone's experience beyond my own. Like, isn't that what we
Yeah,
read like fiction for, especially nonfiction?
yeah.
So yeah, I totally love this. I'm very like glad to hear that you loved it as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I consider myself a pretty progressive person, and I'm pretty knowledgeable about sexuality and gender and things like this. And I still found this book to be so interesting, and I learned so much. Although I really think there's always just a benefit of seeing the world through somebody else's eyes and seeing somebody else's experience. And yeah, this book, it's one that really stuck with me. I'm somebody who can quite often read a book and forget what it was about 2 weeks later, and this is one that yeah, is still sticking with me, so I love it.
And anybody that's listening or watching, if you want to go back, that's episode 373 with Amy. I love those type of episodes because we have Mike, we have Tia, and we have Paul, and plus the guest. Like, that's like the high end of like people that can talk about really smart stuff. Well,
I was
Mike's
gonna say
hosting.
that's like some
Yeah,
top
yeah.
tier academic
Yeah.
literary. I listen
But
to that to get smarter, etc.
yeah,
And then Mike's there. Yeah,
that's
I
the
get you.
that's the Mike has to be there, but
Mike's our
no, but
everyman.
Right.
but that was a roster because I was proof listening to that episode and I was just like learning as I
Yeah.
was proof listening. So
Mhm.
go check it
Mhm.
out. Amy's great. I mean, this book, other books that are being challenged as well. Like it's a really wonderful conversation. So,
Mm-hmm.
Kevin, I'm glad you
Yes.
enjoyed this book and I'm glad you brought it up because as we were talking backstage before we got on here, I think there's a few books that come up on the show a lot,
Hmm.
and it is because not only are they important to read, but I think it's just they've been impactful to all the people in IRCB. So we all kind of want to talk about them at different points when we
Yeah.
kind of get to them, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's solid. Well, I guess let me talk about one more book. Or Danny, why don't you talk about one more book, and I got one more book too.
sure. So I want to talk about Night Fever from Image Comics, based on the Bee Gees song. No, I'm just kidding. It is not based on the Bee Gees hit song. This is another Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips, Jacob Phillips joint. And that could be everything I say about this, and you would
Yep.
know that it's a good book. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it is really weird to talk about their books because, and even to review them, just because, like, what can I tell you that you haven't already learned over the past, I don't know, however long they've been teaming up to do books together? Let me give you
So,
a quick synopsis. Yeah, go ahead, Kara.
well, I guess my question is because, like, I have read a bunch of Brubaker Phillips stuff. When you say Brubaker Phillips, I think noir murder mystery.
Boom, you
But
got it.
right, oh,
Yeah.
okay. But I also think I never understand what those books are about. Like, I know it's a noir murder mystery, but every time I read them, I'm just like, this is a book for Paul. This is over my head. Like, you know, so
It's
You know,
where are we
interesting.
on this one, Danny?
Yeah.
No, it's funny you say that because I as I was reading the book, I read the afterword at the back of the book, and Brubaker was talking about how they wanted to take a break. But for them, taking a break doesn't mean stop making comics. It just means to do a different book, right?
Yeah.
So they stopped doing the
Fair.
Reckless series, which is their private detective type of story, and they're doing this. Let me tell you about the synopsis so you can see how this book is very different to like it is all those things you mentioned, but I think it's also more, which is what I really enjoyed about it.
Okay.
In Europe on a business trip, Jonathan Webb can't sleep. Instead, he finds himself wandering the night in a strange foreign city and with his new friend, the mysterious and violent Rainier, as his guide. Rainier shows Jonathan the hidden world of the night, a world without rules or limits, but when the fun turns dangerous, Jonathan may find himself trapped in the dark, and the question is, what will he do to get home?
So it's Fight
Uh,
Club.
it's Fight Club. It's
Yeah.
Okay.
what's the other movie with the people with the masks?
Eyes Wide
Well,
Shut.
Eyes
No,
Wide Shut. Yeah. It's a lot. So it's
Kinda.
got a lot of those little flavors. Uh, the best way I can recommend this is because I started reading this book, I couldn't put it down. I read
Yeah.
it in like 45 minutes.
oh my
I
god.
couldn't stop turning the pages. It's really well paced too. You get these little chapter breaks.
Hmm.
And I want to commend Jacob Phillips on this one. His use of colors to give you the tone and the ambient of this like European underground. It
Mm-hmm.
is amazing. It's not unlike stuff I haven't seen before, but it's just something that really stood out this time in one of their books. Like if you're doing a book with your dad, Sean Phillips and Brubaker, like you're in really good company. But the fact that I feel like he kind of outshone them for a little bit, like in this
Mm-hmm.
one, just really goes to recognize how great of a creator he is, and I can see why he has now his own, like he's branching off and doing his own thing outside of just coloring books with his dad, which also really cool that you kind of get to work with your dad, like making
Yeah.
comics and doing something you're both passionate about. That's got to be
Mm-hmm.
really cool. But yeah, Mike, what did you think of this book? I know you've also
Yeah,
read this.
I sat down. I same exact thing. Like I was like, oh, I'll maybe like read half of this and then I'll go eat lunch and I'll come back. And I read it full forward, right? Um, it was it's different than uh than Reckless in a lot of ways, and it's different from I think like Criminal. It's different from a lot of the other works that they've done together, like Kill or Be Killed, in that it feels like a nonstop story, right? Like I feel like Kill or Be Killed, Reckless, all that stuff, they have chunks. And they kind of have this like beat after beat after beat pacing, whereas this one was very much just like nonstop, ever flowing from beginning to end, and it's kind of like wound up in this nice little bow that kind of almost made me feel uncomfortable at the end. In that for everything that happens in the story, it should not end so nice and tidy.
Yeah.
Which like it almost kind of it makes you feel gross at the end of it. So I really liked it. I really enjoyed it, and it was an interesting departure from what they've been doing.
Yeah.
Because like when they did a book like Fatale, I liked it, but it wasn't in my mind like their best work. It's a great story, but like overall, it kind of falls off at the end. This
Mhm.
one had that same vibe, less supernatural, more like just like 70s like suspense thriller. Because it is a 70s
Yeah.
movie. And I really like the way that Brubaker was able to like capture that feeling throughout the whole thing.
There's a lot of like is this really happening, or like a lot of unreliable narrator kind of stuff. Like Mike said at the end, like you could be like, did any of what I just read actually happen? Like it
Yeah.
is having the reader question themselves while they're reading something like that. I think that's a very neat treat that you have to really stick the landing, or it's gonna feel cheesy or it's not gonna work. But
Mm-hmm.
this one
I
worked
was gonna
very
say
well.
I'm getting it was all a dream, and you're like, God damn it! But you're saying that wasn't the reaction.
But that's the thing. You got to read it to really make that decision for yourself, because it
Okay.
feels like it could be that, but it also feels like it couldn't based off of some other things that happen. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think of the end of Inception as like whatever you want out of that. That's kind of what this book is.
Yeah.
Not
It could be.
unrelated to Inception in all other ways except that whole
Yeah.
like how you feel at
It,
the end of that movie.
it has an ambiguous ending. How about that?
Yeah,
We'll
yeah,
say
yeah.
that.
Sure.
Um,
Okay.
uh, Yeah, no, Danny, I'm glad that you brought that up. I picked that up on Wednesday from the shop and immediately came home and read it. It was like, this is happening right now. And I know I'm a Reckless book behind. I didn't even read that latest one yet. So, yeah. Well, let me talk about one book really quick, and then we'll get into a top 4 pile, and we'll talk a little bit more to Kevvo about their Kickstarter for Z-Class Trix. I read Girl Juice by Benji Nate. This is a Drawn and Quarterly book that I picked up when I was in Canada, because I went to Canada. I went to the Drawn and Quarterly Library something in French that I can't remember the name of, but it was super
Look
cute.
at
And it was
you.
basically
Look at you,
well,
so fancy.
yeah, it was fun. I was going to Montreal anyways. Kelly and I, we went on a little vacation up to Quebec City and to Montreal. It was a lot of fun. And so we went into basically what felt like Williamsburg, but in Montreal.
Sure.
And that's where this library was. They had 2 bookstores that are like a couple blocks from each other, which I thought was funny. But one is like a bookstore for children's books, and the other is like their Drawn and Quarterly, like full bookshop that has their stuff plus a bunch of other publishers stuff, which was pretty cool. But I picked up this book, Girl Juice. It maybe is the funniest book that I've read all year. And I read Danger and Other Unknown Risks, which is probably one of the funniest books I've read in a very long time. This is the Ryan North and Erica Henderson book. Amazing. I also read a new installment of Megan Mogg. So like this book being almost the top contender, maybe the top contender for the year, pretty impressive if you're on, my side of things.
Sure.
But ultimately, this book is I'm going to give you a little piece of the synopsis. Welcome to Girl Juice House, home of the hottest gang in town. Benji Nate's stylish and rambunctious sense of humor lovingly takes digs at the young and tragically hip, reserved and introspective Nana, comically hypersexual Bunny, fledgling YouTuber Tula, and designated Mon trademark Sadie as they navigate life, love, and the pursuit of a good time. It's a very funny book, like I said. It mostly focuses on the character Bunny, who is like in the antics of being a girl boss with a U, who knows what she wants. She lives a very messy life full of strange escapades and sexcapades. She's very cool. She's too cool for her friends, but she also desperately wants them to love her because she really, really loves them. And all the lives of these 4 women in this house are pretty wild as they try to be independent people who are forced together by the crushing world of I simply can't afford to live by myself. I mean, this book doesn't really have that greater message or anything, but that's kind of like the implied idea.
Sure.
And the last chunk of this book is probably the funniest piece, as they discover that their house is haunted. And so the YouTuber Tula, she is being haunted like on screen, and it's very funny as antics ensue. This is kind of like a strip comic style story where like some of the stories are 2 pages or 1 page or a couple of pages, and then the last chunk of the story is like a good 30 or 40 pages that kind of like rounds out the volume. Really, really funny though. If you're looking for like a book that's kind of going to make you laugh about like the modern day like 20 something, this is the best book you could pick up this year, and I loved every single page of it. Once I started to realize that it was making fun of itself after a couple of pages, I was like, oh, this is the funniest thing I've ever read. So highly recommend Girl Juice if you get a chance. It's very funny.